is Carolyn Steinbrink, and today I'm interviewing J.F. McLaren. And Mr. McLaren has some things he wants to tell us, so we're just going to turn it over to him. There you go.
Okay. My name is J.F. McLaren. My parents were George and Gail McLaren. I was the oldest of 5 boys, and my grandparents are John and Jenny McLaren and Fred and Artie Christ. I lived 2.5 miles northwest of Shenandoah. I went to country school there, a mile from home, and I guess we were supposed to talk about the 1930s. So I remember definitely the 1934 drought. We didn't hardly raise any corn that year, and things kind of got slim pickings. Then came the 1936 drought, which was real bad. It was worse than 34. I saw temperatures that year get up to 114. We didn't have any electricity and no fans or anything. And then that winter of 36, we had a lot of bad snowstorms and cold weather. And I remember helping scoop, and the neighbors pitched in 3/4 of a mile of snow to get down to Highway 2 so we could get out and get to Shenandoah. And we got in that afternoon and got groceries, and wind picked up and snow started again. By next morning, all of our path down through the roads was drifted back in and closed again. We'd drive down through some of the bad drifts. You couldn't see out over the sides. And then walking to school, we went a mile to school, and that winter there was a cut through a hill before we got down to the schoolhouse, and it was drifted level full, and the snow was so hard you could walk right on top of the drifts, and we could walk along there and reach out and touch the telephone lines, and the whole road was filled in. And I guess that's about all I know of this winter storm. That summer, during the drought, why, we had cracks in alfalfa field that was up to 3 inches wide, and you could stick a pitchfork handle clear down the full depth of the fork handle, and we had to watch when we hauled hay out of that alfalfa field that we crossed the cracks and didn't go with them, or the hay rack would fall in. And then back then, why, they did a lot of truck farming. The river was straightened then, and the old river beds, farmers, people from Shenandoah would come out, and they'd kind of homestead a little patch there and plant gardens and take the produce to Shenandoah to sell. And I remember some of the biggest watermelons and the potatoes I ever saw was grown in those truck gardens down there. And they grew peonies and flowers too. And the rendering plant was down by the river, just off of Old Highway 2 on the west side of the river. And in 1936, we had lost a lot of workhorses, and they were piled up so that they couldn't handle them all. They haul them in there and just put them in a pile. and the state come down and made them bury a lot of those horses because they couldn't process them all. And we ended up getting the southeast. Well, we'd really catch it up home. In 1929, I remember when the old Highway 2 was paved. They detoured a mile north of Highway 2, which was just a quarter of a mile north of where we lived. And Dad had a contract with the state whenever it rained. Why, there's a big hill up just north of us that they called Eskew Hill, and Dad had a contract with the state to pull cars up that hill in the mud, and hung a lantern out in front of the Fordson tractor, and that's all the light we had. I remember Dad going down and going on Highway 2, going to Shenandoah, which wasn't open yet, and somebody stopped him, and I told him, well, that was illegal to do that, and he told him, well, he's working for the state, so so they let him go on. And in 1931, within a year's time, between my dad's and my grandfather McLaren, we had 3 fires. One was a straw pile while we're thrashing. The straw pile caught on fire. A hot piece of metal come out of the thrash machine and blew into the straw pile. And I remember Dad coming up home, with a Model T truck and throwing a walking plow in the truck and taking it back down there, and they took the tractor off the thrash machine and hooked it on this walking plow. The guys take turns hanging on the plow, running around that straw pile, keep it from spreading out into the stubble field. And then during that same year, my grandfather McLaren had a house in Shenandoah on Elm Street that caught fire one night, a 2-story brick house, and he tied some bed sheets together and some bedding and tied it to the post of the bed and threw them out the window and tossed his lockbox out that he had under the bed and slid down the bedding rope and dropped on down the ground. And they got the fire put out, and then Dad got a call about 6 o'clock in the morning. The fire broke out again, and it pretty well demolished the inside of that house. My grandmother was up with one of her daughters in Storm Lake, and so she wasn't home at the time.
What caused it?
They never really said. They didn't know for sure what caused it. And I remember we went in the next day and kind of stepped inside the house, and some of us kids were going to run on up and go upstairs, and Dad got all over us and said we could fall through into the basement and for us to get out of there. And then the third fire was out where we lived. Everything burned one evening but the house, and a big double corn crib with a shed on each side and a big barn. And they were shelling corn, and we reset the sheller that evening with a tractor and kind of pulled the tractor up into the shuck pile, and we gas exhaust lit the shucks, and they'd blown the shucks kind of into corner where the barn and the corn crib cornered in. And boy, a fire started up over both buildings, and it had burlap bags soaked in water, trying to keep the house from going. And the roof would catch on fire, and they'd keep putting it out. And we pulled all the dresser drawers out of the dressers and pulled the car, a Model A car we had around in front, and just put dresser drawers in our clothing and stuff in the car because they figured the house was going too. And that was quite a deal.
Did they have a fire department in town?
Yeah,
Fight?
but they came out, but they had to use water that was in the water tanks and stock tanks and stuff. That's all the water they really had. Model T truck was sitting there, had a cloth top on it. It caught on fire, and we pulled the Fordson tractor out of the way and kind of headed down the driveway, and it got so hot a guy jumped off the tractor that was steering it, that went and run over and run into the bank on the other side of the road. And it was quite an evening. Then I remember we didn't have any electricity at home in the 30s, and we had carbide lights. We had a cylinder or a big tank down in the ground that we put water in, and then we buy containers of carbide, I guess. As soon as it hit the water, those granules would form a gas, and we had that piped into the house, and we had gas lights in the house. And then later, then we had a 32-volt light plant, and there's 16 2-volt batteries, and all hooked in a series. And we had the engine in the basement, and the exhaust piped out under the front porch. And this engine would start automatically. Whenever the batteries got low, it'd start and charge the batteries up. And we had 32-volt lights. You buy light bulbs. And Mother had a 32-volt iron and a 32-volt vacuum.
Oh my.
And of course the house, then we wired it and so it was wired already for electricity when we got that. And that electricity never come till the early 40s, I guess. And it was always my brother and my job to go out in the hog lot, and we'd feed ear corn to the hogs, and then they'd kind of root the cobs to one side. We'd take bushel baskets out and pick up cobs to burn in the cook stove. And then one winter we burned corn in the cook stove because it's cheaper than coal. And we did our own butchering and render our own lard and cut up our meat and ground our own sausage and make that into patties and fry it. And then we put it in big crocks and pour the lard over it to that would preserve it and keep it out in we had a big back porch that was, in the wintertime it was pretty cold out there, and we'd put that meat out there, and then we cured our own hams, and we got along good. Everybody was honest back then. We never locked any doors at night or when we left for the day or anything. Nobody had any money, and everybody's honest, and we just trusted everybody, and everybody trusted us. So It's different, sure different than it is
Yes, it
today.
Do you think that that your life, like rendering your own lard and those kinds of things, do you think the Depression made you do that, or would that have been just something that you would have done no matter whether the Depression was in existence?
Well, we probably have done it anyway. There wasn't, back then there wasn't much, well, there was meat markets, but it was high to buy the beef, and we raised our own beef and pork and had our own hogs, and it was kind of customary that everybody would butcher in the fall or in the winter.
If you talked about the cobs to burn, if a person lived in town and used cobs for stoves, where would they have gotten those cobs?
Well, I don't know. They'd have to come to the farm to get them
Well,
somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Do you remember that your parents ever sold any cobs?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the cobs would be free to anybody for asking or something, but
were there seed houses here in town, like big corn seed houses that might have had cobs available?
I don't know. Of course, they sold seed, and I remember the seed houses selling a lot of chicken feed and baby chick feed and baby chickens and, well, hog feed also.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming into the creameries, and we'd have 50-gallon barrels with the tops cut out of them, and we'd go down the alley and back up to the back door of the creamery, and we'd pump buttermilk into these barrels and haul it out, and we fed a lot of buttermilk to hogs.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd soak a lot of ground corn in that buttermilk and let it get sour.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the pigs just go crazy over that stuff.
Yeah. Did you have a name you called that you fed them?
Well, just slop.
I
We
was gonna
slop
say, that's
dogs.
what we called that too.
Yeah. And I remember another thing that when we get ready to put up hay, of course we raked the hay mowed it and raked it with a dump rake in bunches, and then we'd have to pitch that onto the hay rack and haul it to the barn. And Dad could go into Shenandoah here and in front of the local pool halls, and there'd be guys sitting on the curb waiting to, nothing to do. They were tickled to get a job for the day, and you could hire them for $1 a day, and their dinner, and you could get any number of guys you wanted for $1 a day, and well, I guess that's about all I had to talk about, I guess. Oh, one other thing, or a couple. There's only 2 in my class in country school, and we'd go over the neighbor kids, and we never thought about anything about walking a mile or 2 cross country or something to the neighbors and play that afternoon. And so we were over at the neighbors one day, and it's in the winter time, and they had a big stock tank there, and we saw some goldfish down in that tank, and well, we got the wild idea that this tank had ice on it, and those fish couldn't get air. So there's an old dull axe laying there that they used to break ice in the tank so cattle could get their drink. So we decided, well, we better use that axe and cut a hole in there. And so a neighbor gal says, well, Jay, where you want to cut the hole? And I says, just about there, and she had this axe raised up. And I leaned over, and she come down and hit me on the head. I cut a big gash in my head. I had a leather helmet on, like, well, kids wore those back then. Had the ear flappers folded up. And it cut down through that helmet and bashed it down in my head. So, blood just runs. So we went up to the house, and her mother had a pitcher pump there, and so she was washing my hair, and she grabbed a bunch of Lysol she had there, disinfected, and poured it in there, and scrubbed my hair good, and so I went on home, and for probably 6 weeks afterwards, every time I washed my hair, all you could smell was Lysol.
But you walked home.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you didn't ever go to a doctor for something?
No, nah.
Yeah.
It had to be pretty bad before you went to the doctor. 'Cause
Did the doctor come to you at the farm ever?
I remember, yes. One time, a neighbor kid went to our country school, had the itch, they called it. And he had medicated soap, but he had his own little washpan there and his own bar of soap. And so when they would get ready to eat dinner or something, why he'd he'd have his own separate pan to wash in. So a teacher, country school teacher, roomed at our house. And so one night I came home and I started breaking out a little bit here, and kind of in the edge of my hair, and so mother and the teacher decided, well, I was getting the itch. And so they had some medicated soap, and they washed my hair real good with that, and warm water and stuff. And it dried my hair off, and man, did I break out then, and I had the chicken pox.
Oh.
I exposed the whole school to the chicken pox, and even the teacher got it. So where I picked it up, I don't know. But
Did the teacher live with you the whole year, or did
just
you move from place to place during the year?
no, she stayed with us through the school, as long as school was in session while she stayed there. We had a couple different teachers that roomed with us. And this teacher was from Sydney, and she was my first grade and second grade teacher. And she was only 18. She just graduated from high school. She didn't have to go to college to be a teacher. And we had just one superintendent, a county superintendent then. It wasn't like each school had their superintendent.
How old were the oldest boys in the school?
Oh, probably, let's see, 16, I suppose, or something like
Not
that.
much younger than the teacher.
Well, yeah, that's it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, one kid was 8th grader, and well, he'd have been about 13 or 14, I suppose. And so, and the teacher was 18.
Did that cause any discipline problems?
Oh, no.
No?
No, teacher ruled the roost, so.
I'll bet especially for you and your brothers, because she lived with you. Right?
Well, yeah.
You didn't get by with much.
No.
Of it.
And I'd stay after school in the wintertime mainly and sweep the floor. A teacher kind of hired me to do that and get in the coal and the cobs and for the fire the next day. And dust the erasers and some of that stuff, clean the blackboards.
And what did you do with your money?
I don't know. I didn't get that much, really, but I don't know.
I thought maybe you could remember coming to town on a Saturday night and using it for candy or something.
I remember coming to town on Saturday nights, and if all of us kids in the family would be real good and not cause any problems that evening in town, why, Dad would go to J Drug and get a quart of hand-packed ice cream. They had a round container and so tall, and boy, they could pack that ice cream in there real good and take that home. And well, that's before my youngest brother was born, of course, and we'd have to divide that 6 ways, Mother and Dad, and 4 of us boys. And boy, we'd look to see which is the biggest dish, and we'd lick the lid. And that's quite a treat.
Did you, as a family, pretty much every Saturday go to town?
Oh,
Like
yes,
Saturday evening?
Saturday night, yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was a big time in town. And, we'd take some cream to town on Saturday nights, and I don't remember ever taking eggs in, but we'd take some cream. In 1936, Dad had 6 cows that we milked. I'd have to milk 3 cows every morning and night every morning before I went to school, and he'd be waiting for me that night too. And he milked the other 3. And
Would
go
the
ahead.
money from the cream that you brought into town pretty much pay for your groceries that you had to buy?
Well, it'd go a long ways. I don't know as it paid for all of it, but I don't remember. But I remember there was a guy that had a meat market in Shenandoah that he would buy fat heifers off of Dad, and he would come to the farm, and we'd run that critter into a single corn crib we had, and he would butcher that heifer right there. And he'd hang it up, stretch it up, and cut it in half and let it hang there all night. He'd come out after work and do that after it got cool in the evening. And he'd come out early the next morning, and I'd help him cut it in quarters then. He'd hang on to the bottom, the front quarter that's hanging down, and I'd cut it across. And so one time I went rabbit hunting, and I skinned a rabbit and hung it up beside his beef there. And he thought that was quite a deal. They come out the next morning there, that rabbit was hanging beside his beef.
When you were at school, what kind of games did you play?
We played baseball, and popular deal was, what is it, Andy Over? Or, yeah, we'd throw a ball over the schoolhouse roof, and if it didn't go clear over, why, it'd call pigtail, and it'd come rolling back down off the roof. Yeah, that was quite a deal.
And then if it went over, what happened?
Well, I forget how they played that. You'd have to chase somebody around that caught the ball or something. I don't remember how all that
There were
went.
2 teams,
Yeah,
both sides.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and then one thing I kind of remember, we used to take hot lunches to school in the wintertime, like soup, and teacher would, in a glass jar, and the teacher would set that in a pan of hot water on the stove, about 11:30, and heat the soup up good. And so after dinner one day, we were out there playing at recess, and during noon hour, and so one of the neighbor kids, he's younger than I was, he sat down on his quart fruit jar beside the light pole there, the flagpole, and so we're just foxing around there, and so I thought I'd be funny. I went up and kicked the jar out from under him, and that jar exploded. That really cut him up. The teacher sent me and him and a whole bunch of gauze and tape and out to the outhouse, and I had to patch him up. Well, I'll never forget that.
And he probably walked home that night.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
yeah, sure. And once in a while, if it rained while we're at country school, Dad or the hired man would come over and team and wagon and pick us up and haul us home. The other neighbor kids, they had workhorses they could ride, so they'd bring another extra workhorse or two, come over, and all the kids hop on them and ride home.
Do you think that there were any things that your family did differently because of the Depression?
Oh, yeah. We just didn't, well, there just wasn't any entertainment. We'd all sit around the radio and listen at night, a battery-operated radio, and listen to Amos and Andy or Charlie McCarthy. We did a lot more, I think Mother did a lot more home canning, and never bought any bread. We always baked our own bread. And I guess that was about it.
Were your clothes homemade, or did you buy them in the store?
Oh, we bought them. In 36, when it's so hot that summer, well, we'd have overalls that all the knees were wore out in or something, and we cut those off above the knees, and we pump water and carry buckets of water out to a new stock tank that Dad had bought that summer and hadn't used yet. We'd pour water in that tank, and we'd hop in there. Oh, that was our swimming hole. And that's all we'd wear is a pair of just overalls with the legs cut off of them.
Get cool.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What can you remember about Christmas?
Christmas was, no big deal at the time. Of course, we always hung up our stockings, and we believed in Santa Claus, and up to a point. And I remember one Christmas, we got up in the morning, and there was a Mother had dressed chickens the night before, and there was a chicken foot, a leg and a foot in one of our stockings. We wondered what the heck happened there. And but then that was kind of the end of our beliefs.
Did you have my father always told that they got an orange for Christmas.
Yeah, there'd always be an orange in the stocking. And, I don't think there was ever any candy bars or anything. Well, there's some Christmas candies in there, and maybe a little goodie or something that would go in the stocking. But
so what were your Christmas candies like?
Is hard candy, and Mother made, she made taffy at times, and she made some other kind of a hard candy that That was hard. You had to let it melt before you couldn't break it and chew it. Oh, yeah, too, we had one of the first rubber-tired tractors around Shenandoah. Dad bought a 1938 W.C. Alice Chalmers, and it was on rubber. And two neighbors bought tractors that spring also, and they were both on steel. And they said, yeah, you could tell what went on at home, because the kids would come to school and say, yeah, I'll wait till you get stuck, and then we'll have to come over and pull you out.
Yeah.
And I still have that tractor.
Oh, do you really?
Yes, I have the tractor I learned on. And it'll still run.
Very good.
Yeah.
Did you do anything special for birthdays?
Not that I can remember, no. Birthday was just another birthday. I remember in the summertime, like in 36 and 34, we had a big screened-in porch and had army cots. And it's so hot in the house that we'd sleep out in that porch. And if it'd come up a storm, why, we'd have to gather up our things and head for the inside. But because the wind would blow the rain through the screen. But we didn't have any fans or no air conditioning or anything like that.
And do you remember as a child that it was hot?
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah. And then in 36, we shocked a lot, cut corn off, the corn stalks off, and put it in shocks. And there's a guy that lived in a little shack down along the river, well, right just across the fence from our farm, and caught him one day. He's running up there, he's around those shocks, shucking the ears of corn out, because down by the river it was protected, and we had some fairly good ears of corn on those stalks down there where it's protected. And he was putting them in a knapsack, and he'd walk to Shenandoah and sell that corn, and maybe get him a loaf of bread or something to live on. And then he'd spend the rest of the day sitting in front of the fire station here in Shenandoah.
Were there hobos?
Oh, yeah. I remember a lot of times they'd come to the door about breakfast time, and we called them tramps. And they were just homeless people that, well, they'd looking for a job. And mother'd give them some pancakes or something for whatever we had for breakfast, and let them sit out on the back step and eat, and then they'd be on their way. And I remember gypsies in a covered wagon, and they'd be out roaming around in the summertime, and usually they'd have a milk cow tied behind their wagon or something, and an old team hooked to the wagon, or maybe a goat. And they'd kind of go through the countryside, and whenever they're around, why, we watched things pretty close until they got out of the neighborhood. 'Cause you didn't trust a gypsy.
Do you think they were homeless families that were moving, or were they really gypsies?
They were just gypsies. They dressed like gypsies, and they, well, they'd steal from you if you had a chance, and or try to beat you out of something or something.
Can you think of anything else that you?
little note here. What about the CCC camps?
Oh yeah, I remember them. That was at the west end of town down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them going out and planting trees and doing conservation work on some ditches and things. And then later, that same camp was prisoner of war camp in Shenandoah.
Okay, where exactly do you remember it being?
That was at the end of Main Street down here, well, where the Chinese restaurant is,
Oh.
and where Pizza Hut is,
Uh-huh.
right on that corner in there.
Oh, and that's where the CCC camp
Yeah.
was too?
Hmm.
Okay.
And then just west of that, they had a pea hauler. People used, farmers used to grow peas, and we helped harvest peas and haul them in there and pitch them into that pea hauler. And it'd hull the peas, and then the stems and the refuse would go out into a pile. They had a big pile of that out there too, and that would be kind of silage or something.
And what were the peas then? Were they canned and used for human consumption, or were they?
Yeah, they'd haul them to Nebraska City over to, what was the name of the place? Morton House,
Okay.
I think it was. Hauled them over there to a canning plant. And the sweet corn the same way. There's different guys that raise sweet corn.
Would they plant these peas by the acre, or did they plant them in smaller areas?
Oh yeah, they had them in acres. Just down the road a half mile from us, that guy had, he'd probably have 15, 20 acres of peas. And it seemed like every time you got ready to harvest peas, why, it'd be raining. And the fields would be muddy, but there's a short period of time that you had to get, if the peas were ready, you had to get them harvested, or else it'd get too hard.
So what did they use to harvest them? What kind of a...
We would mow them and windrow them. We had a windrower on the back side of the sickle mower, and so it'd kind of put them in the windrow as being mowed, and then use a hay loader on them. And but you didn't want to put very many peas on vines on a hay rack, only about 3 or 4 foot deep, and that was a load. And come in a pea hauler, why, you'd only stick the pitchfork in about half an inch or an inch and you'd get all you could pick up to pitch them into the hauler.
And then it just went through their vines and all.
Yeah, and peas come out one spout and vines went out the other.
Now, at one time, there was a cannery here in town, wasn't there?
I don't remember a cannery in Shenandoah.
Okay.
No. It could have been, but I
I
don't.
think there was for a little while, but
Yeah.
that's probably earlier. I don't remember exactly. I can't think of anything more to ask you. Have you got more on your list that we haven't covered?
No, I think that's pretty well it. Of course, we raised a lot of chickens and had our own eggs, and I'd raise a bunch of chickens in the spring and sell them for 50 cents a piece for fryers, and I made a little spending money. And then Dad gave me a pig one time. He had the thumps, we called it, and he thought the pig was going to die anyway. And so, well, he said, give me that pig, and if I could keep him alive, and so I turned him out in a kind of a weed patch there, and keep feeding him, and we got survived, and so we sold him. And that time, if hogs were up a quarter, why, boy, you thought the market really exploded. And if they'd gone down a nickel or a dime, why, you thought the bottom had dropped out of the market.
Yeah.
And then after that, I bought a heifer from Dad, and when we sold her, why, Dad put the money in my name in the bank here in Shenandoah, and $45 I got for that heifer, and the bank went busted, and I lost about $45.
Your whole savings.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, darn.
But we survived, and everybody worked together, and we had a good time, I guess. We didn't
Know any better.
know any better.
Yeah. Were you the oldest?
Yes,
Okay.
I was
thought
the
maybe you
oldest,
were.
yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been
Well,
interesting. I've enjoyed listening to
well,
you.
I hope I highlighted some stuff.
I'm sure you did. Fun. Thanks.